All right, good morning, everybody. Chapter 16 today, Monopolistic competition. So if this sounds like a combination of the two words of the two previous chapters, right? We went over perfect competition, and then we went over monopoly, and now you're like, monopolistic competition? You just put the two together? Yes, that's exactly really what it is. Okay, so we're going to talk about the third market structure that we'll talk about in this class. There are 4 total. Let me give you a brief reminder of what we've done so far. So at one end of the spectrum was perfect competition, okay? And then at the other end of the spectrum was monopoly, okay? And this is the spectrum of like market power, or the ability to change your price of your product. In perfect competition, are you able to change the price of your product? No, right? Basically, the idea there is, imagine that you're just a seller at a swap meet and you're selling the same exact product everybody else is. If you walk in and you sell even a cent more than everybody else, the buyers will just go to the other people at the swap meet. So you don't have any market power. So you have no market power. It means no ability to change the price. All the way down here, you have this guy called monopoly, right? Monos means one. So there's one seller. Now this guy, does he have the ability to change the price? Yeah, he has full ability to change the price, right? And so some interesting things for this guy. Everyone is a price taker. That means they can't change the price. And remember, there's no long-run profits. No long-run profits. And if you don't remember how to move the perfect competition marketplace from the short run to the long run, please go back to chapter, 14. And remember how to do that, because we're going to do the same similar thing with a monopolistic competition. So it's important to understand how we get no long-run profits. On the other hand, in monopoly, there's only one seller. One seller. All right. They have market power. That means the ability to change the price. So market power is the opposite of being a price taker, right? Having market power is the opposite of being a price taker. And you can have long-run profits here. Okay, and then in between the two, in like order of increasing ability to change your price or increasing ability to change to have market power, we got these guys here called monopolistic competition. And that's the guy people we're learning about today. And then over here, we have oligopoly. And we're going to learn about these guys next chapter. Okay? So this is kind of ranking the 4 different types of businesses that you might encounter. All right? Right? You might encounter a business in the perfect competition. I'm totally missing some letters here. Competition. I know how to spell. And you might encounter a company that's kind of in the monopoly market structure. You might encounter someone in monopolistic competition. You might encounter someone in oligopoly. Okay? So we're going to go over this today. I'm going to teach you what it is. And then, of course, the same thing we do for all of these, how do I maximize my profit? Right? We learned how to maximize our profit in monopoly. You just set the marginal revenue equal to marginal cost curve. Right? This guy is quite simple because they can't set a price, so all they have to set is a quantity, right? Wherever price equals marginal cost. And we will also look at profit maximization in monopolistic competition and oligopoly. Luckily, every place in all 4 of these market structures, 1, 2, 3, 4, the profit maximizing condition is always marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So as long as you remember marginal revenue equals marginal cost, you're going to be good for every market structure. Okay? And to jog your memory, what's marginal revenue? Well, I'm selling 10 products, and if I go to sell product number 11, how much additional revenue do I get from customers? That's marginal revenue. Marginal cost is, if I'm selling 10 products and I go to make number 11, how much additional cost do I have to put out? Right? If at any time the money I get from customers, the marginal revenue, is more than how much it costs me, the marginal cost, I should go ahead and make that product. And then I ask again, should I make one more product after that? That's basically the way we think about profit maximization. We call that thinking at the margin. Thinking at the margin, the very last one. Okay, so look for the answers to these questions. What kind of market structures lie between perfect competition and monopoly, and what are their characteristics? Okay, so we're going to expound more on these red guys here in the middle. Okay, how do monopolistically competitive firms choose price and quantity? Do they earn profit? Right. So this is our question for any type of business. We're always like, okay, now I know what category your business is. How do I maximize profit in it? Right. So I'm teaching you how to do that there. And how is monopolistic competition good for society? Remember, perfect competition we think of as like the best for society because consumer surplus, producer surplus, total surplus is all maximized. Everything is the best possible, right? We have all of the quantity that we should produce here. Monopoly, was this good for society or was this worse for society? Anybody remember? Let's talk about the price. The price of a monopolist, is that higher or lower than the price that a perfectly competitive marketplace would have? Higher. The price is higher. What about the quantity? The quantity of monopoly compared to quantity of perfect competition. Do you guys remember? It's lower. They sell fewer items, right? So in general, the price is higher and they sell fewer, right? We got people who want the product but can't get it because the price is too high. The welfare is lower for society here, okay, for a single price monopoly, okay? Now there's that one exception where if we allow the monopoly to charge a different price for every single person, okay, go back and look that up if you don't remember. It's called perfect price discrimination. If they do that, then this guy is just as efficient as perfect competition, but usually monopoly is worse off. So the good question to ask is, well, how does monopolistic competition affect society? Is it better than perfect competition? Well, probably not. This is the best, right? Is it as bad as monopoly? Well, also probably not, because it's like, you know, in order here. So that's just kind of a roadmap of where we're going. And then finally, we're going to talk just briefly about advertising. This is interesting because this is the first kind of market structure that you need advertising in. You don't need advertising here, and you don't need advertising here. Obviously, you don't need it here. Why don't you need it here? It's just you, right? Why don't you need it here? This is a little more tricky. Because everybody's selling the exact same product anyway, right? And if you had to charge, if you had to pay for advertising, you'd have to charge a little bit more for your product, and then nobody would come and buy your product from you, right? So for the very first time, we're going to talk about advertising. Okay. So between monopoly and perfect competition, we've got here's the two endpoints, right? Perfect competition, right here. Many firms, identical products. On the other end, we have monopoly, one firm, right? One firm, one product. Okay, in between the two, the general name for both of these guys is imperfect competition, right? Because we had perfect competition here, we have imperfect competition. So we've got oligopoly. Now, brief description of what is oligopoly. Only a few sellers. What's a brief description of monopolistic competition? Many firms sell similar but not identical products. So these are the last two market structures we're going to examine. Right, so a little background for the names. Oligopoly, you'll notice it sounds a lot like monopoly. We know mono means one. Oligos, actually, in Greek means few, or just a couple, right? So we got just a couple sellers. That's what this is. And then this is monopolistic competition. We have all of the same firm, or all of the idea of a whole bunch of small firms, but this time, instead of all selling the exact identical product, that's monopolistic competition, or perfect competition, they're selling slightly different products. Okay? So if you can imagine, whereas the perfect competition is like a swap meet with a bunch of sellers all selling the exact same ShamWow. Okay, that's perfect competition. Monopolistic competition would be a bunch of same sellers at the same swap meet, but selling slightly different ways to dry your car, right? So one guy's got a ShamWow, and one guy's going to sell a microfiber towel, and one guy's going to sell one of those squeegees or something like that, right? So everybody's selling something slightly different, okay? So that's the idea behind monopolistic competition, okay? So we've got many sellers, right, along the swap meet. We have product differentiation. Now this is the economic term for slightly different products. Product differentiation. Okay. The opposite of product differentiation, identical products, and that's what we saw here in perfect competition. Okay. In every other way besides product differentiation, it's identical to perfect competition. The only difference between monopolistic competition and perfect competition is this product differentiation. So we still have free entry and exit. Free entry and exit. Which means what? What does free entry and exit mean? If I notice that all of these sellers here at the swap meet are making a ton of profit on their different various car drying items, what would I want to do? I'm going to go ahead and drop out of school. I'm going to go sell car drying products, right? Because there's no barriers to entry. That means it's free entry. So I can have as many sellers as I want, okay? So prediction, make a prediction. In the long run, do you think that these sellers are going to be able to make a profit given that there's free entry and exit? No. Very good, right? The same thing we saw here. If anybody starts making a profit here, what happens? More sellers jump in, and then they just drag down everybody's profits until everybody's got zero long-run profits, right? Again, because of the free entry and exit condition, zero long-run profits, right? Hey, question. Does Monopoly, do these guys have free entry and exit? No. By definition, there's something keeping all the other firms out. Now there's only one firm, right? That's the opposite of free entry. Okay. So here's some examples of monopolistic competition, right? We have a bunch of sellers selling apartments, but maybe they're slightly different apartments, right? They're not identical apartments. Or books. Here's a good one, right? A book by, I don't know, a novel that I wrote is probably not as good as a novel written by Danielle Steele or Clive Cussler, or one of those guys, right? One of the big guys. So they're not identical products. Bottled water, right? People pay different prices for different brands of bottled water all the time. Clothing, fast food, I don't know, nightclubs, ShamWows, or I mean car drying apparati, right? We can have all kinds of ideas of monopolistic competition. In my personal opinion, most companies, most firms that we're used to are monopolistic competition. Okay, so most firms that you encounter are not monopolies and they're not perfectly competitive. They're in this monopolistic competition kind of framework. Okay, so let's go ahead and compare perfect competition to monopolistic competition. Let's compare these two guys together. So how many sellers are in both of them? Many. Right? There's many, many, many sellers, and each of them are pretty small, selling very few things. Okay? Is there free entry and exit in both of them? Yep. Free entry and exit. Can they earn long-run economic profits? We briefly talked about this. Can they? No. Neither of them can. Why can't they earn long-run economic profits? Because of this condition. Exactly. Because of the free entry and exit. If anyone's earning profits right now in the short run, well, more people are going to join and start selling and take away your profits. Second side question, I've asked this before, but just to make sure you guys are paying attention. What? Long run profits of zero? How do these people stay in business if the profits are zero? Anybody remember the answer to that question? They're not losing money. This is actually economic profits. It's slightly different than accounting profits, remember? So if you ask their accountant, they're actually making some money. There's more revenues than costs left over at the end of the year. But that's because they're forgetting opportunity costs. Okay, so when they go ahead and subtract out all of the owner's opportunity costs, then they'll get to zero. Okay, so they're, at the end of the day, they actually do have cash in hand. But if you calculate economic profits, it's going to be zero. All right, so here's the only place that these two guys are different from each other. The firm's the products that are being sold are identical in perfect competition. They're slightly different. We use the term differentiated, right? You see the root word, right? Different in there, right? Differentiated. Product differentiation is the hallmark of monopolistic competition, i.e., that's the only way this guy is different from this guy. Okay? So, does the firm have market power? Well, perfect competition, we know that they have no market power whatsoever, right? But according to this little ranking, remember I told you this is ranking on how much they have the ability to change the price? They have a slight ability to change the price. Small, small, small. Why? Well, because they're not selling the exact same product. Remember? The reason why these guys are price takers is because you are one of a bunch of sellers in a row, and if you sell even 1 cent higher, the buyers will go to other sellers, right? But if you have a slightly different product than the guys next to you, right? Say you're Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and then the person next to you is Haagen-Dazs, and then there's Dreyer's, right? You can raise your price a couple of cents for your Ben & Jerry's and still keep your customers, right? Now, if you were to raise it $1 million, everybody's just going to go over to Haagen-Dazs, or whatever the other ones I just said are, right? They're going to go to the other ice cream sellers, okay? So the idea here is they have a small amount of market power, meaning a small amount of ability to set the price, okay? And so what does that mean? The demand curve facing the firm, well, if the firm can't change the price, that means the demand curve is totally flat at whatever the market price is, right? If they can set the price, that means they have a slightly downward sloping demand curve. Slightly downward sloping demand curve. Remember we saw that with the Monopoly, right? The Monopoly had the downward sloping demand curve because he obviously has the ultimate amount of price setting ability because he just talks to the whole marketplace and sells with the whole marketplace. These guys have a slightly downward sloping demand curve. I'll show you a couple of pictures of that in a little bit, right? But so the important thing to note is if you're going to compare this guy, monopolistic competition, with this guy, perfect competition, the only thing really you have to remember is different products. And then these other things kind of fall out of that. Right? These other things are results of having slightly different products. OK, now on the other hand, let's compare monopolistic competition with monopoly. Let's compare these two guys. How are they different? OK? So you probably are going to know the biggest difference is this right here. How many firms are in the marketplace? Well, in a monopoly, there's just one. Duh, right? But there's still many in monopolistic competition. Okay. Now, is there free entry and exit in the monopoly? Talked about that already? No, right? That's why what's keeping there only be one firm. Maybe it's the government is restricting all other potential entrants, all other people who want to open a firm in this industry, right? Maybe the government is restricting it. Monopolistic competition, we do have free entry and exit, right? So you can come in and be an ice cream seller. You won't be exactly Ben & Jerry's. You won't be exactly Haagen-Dazs, right? You might be Justin's homemade frozen yogurt and custard or something like that, right? So anyone can come in and be an ice cream seller, but you won't have the exact same product. Okay. Now, long-run economic profits. We know monopoly can have long-run profits. Boom, that's what I wrote down here. Monopolistic competition can't have long-run economic profits. I know I've asked this question already 5 times today, but why can't monopolistic competition have long-run economic profits? Because of free entry and exit, right? If one firm is, or even all of the firms are earning profits, people are going to come in and sell something similar to you, right? If Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs and Dreyer's are making a killing on ice cream, a whole bunch more ice cream sellers are going to come. Yeah, they're going to be slightly different, but there's going to be enough of them that are going to come that they're going to suck away all the customers, right? Until everybody's having 0 profits. Okay. Does the firm have market power? What does market power mean? The ability to change the price? Obviously, monopoly does. Monopolistic competition, yes. Not as much as monopoly, but they still have the ability to change the price somewhat because they're selling a slightly different product. Okay? And so the demand curve facing the firm, for the monopoly, it's just the entire market. They sell to the entire market, right? But to the monopolistically competitive firm, it's still downward sloping. It's not as downward sloping as this guy, but it's still downward sloping, and it's just a little tiny piece of the market. It's not the whole market. And finally, are there close substitutes to the product that a monopoly sells? No. He's the only guy selling this product, right? On the other hand, are there close substitutes for a monopolistically competitive firm? Yes, there are many close substitutes, right? And I probably won't ask you this question on a test, but I want you to be aware of it. Do you remember what the elasticity is of a product with close substitutes? Oh, way back to chapter 5, elasticity, right? It's more elastic, right? So if there is a bunch of similar ice creams, right? If one guy raises his price, I'm probably going to stop buying and I'm going to go buy this other type of ice cream, right? It's much more elastic. If it was all identical ice cream sellers, that would be perfectly competitive. It would be perfectly elastic, and I would just go to the next one immediately, right? The second he raised 1 cent. If he was a monopolist and the only guy selling ice cream, well, he could probably raise the price quite a bit, and my demand would be pretty inelastic because he's the only guy selling ice cream, right? But when we have close substitutes, I have quite a bit more elasticity, meaning I might switch to the other sellers, okay? So these guys don't have, because of the close substitutes, because of the high elasticity, they have the ability to change the price, but not quite as much as Monopoly. Okay, so let's look at this guy. Let's put a monopolistically competitive firm. Let's have him earn profits. And remember, if he's earning profits, can this be the long run? No. Because in the profits, in the long run, do these guys earn profits? No. So it's got to be in the short run. Okay, so there is the individual firm level market demand. This is not the whole demand curve for the whole marketplace. This is the demand curve just for the people that are interested in your specific flavor of Ben & Jerry's, or of ice cream, i.e. Ben & Jerry's, or i.e. Haagen-Dazs, or something like that, okay? This is not the demand curve for the whole entire marketplace, okay? Now, what do we have to do in order to do profit maximizing? We have to set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. So we need a marginal revenue curve, right? Once I get a demand curve, a marginal revenue curve is easy. I just start at the same spot on the y-axis, and I go down twice as steep. That's how I get the marginal revenue curve, right? I start at the same spot on the y-axis, and then I go down twice as steep. Okay, so I have a marginal revenue curve. Note, once again, marginal revenue is less than price at every point here. Marginal revenue is less than price. Anytime you have a downward sloping demand curve, marginal revenue is less than price, right? For a perfectly competitive firm, let me remind you. So here's the way we think of the perfectly competitive firm. Here's the whole market. This is the whole market demand. This is the whole market supply. It sets a market price. And then the individual firm, he can only sell exactly at that market price. So that's his price. This is also his individual level demand curve. This is also his individual marginal revenue curve, this flat guy right here, right? So for perfectly competitive firms, price equals marginal revenue, because it's all the same, right? But here, the price curve, and where do I get the price from? Always the demand curve, because that's what the demand curve tells me, the price that people are willing to pay for stuff. The price is always higher than marginal revenue. In other words, when I go to sell one more product, I'll sell it for $10, suppose, right? That's the price I sell it for. But the additional revenue I get from selling that product is less than 10. And why is that? Let me say that again. I'm selling 10 products, right? I'm selling number 10. When I sell number 11, even though I'm selling it for a market price of $10, I'm getting less than $10 of total revenue. Why is that? Imagine that I am right here, and that's 10, right? And I want to go sell 11 products. So first of all, I had to lower the price. And I had to lower the price on just number 11, or did I have to lower the price on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 also? I had to lower the price on all of them, right? So even though product number 11, I sold it for $10, I don't get 10 extra dollars. Because I was getting all the other previous products I had already sold. I was going to get more money for all of those, but I had to lower all of the prices to $10. Does that make sense? So the marginal revenue is always less than the price at which I sell that last product for. Okay, let's throw our curves in there because we definitely need, oops, I erased it, but we need marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So we have marginal revenue. Let's throw in a marginal cost curve. And, because we want to know something about profits, that means we're going to have to throw in our ATC curve. Okay? Remember, marginal cost curve always intersects ATC curve at the bottom point, right there. Okay? And also, if I just asked you what the profit maximizing price and quantity was going to be, I just asked you, hey, what's the profit max price and quantity? You don't even need this ATC curve, right? All you need is marginal revenue, marginal cost in order to know profit max. All you need is marginal revenue, marginal cost in order to do the profit max. However, if I asked you exactly how many dollars of profit is the guy making at this point, now we need the ATC curve, right? Because we're going to have to say, well, on average, I know how much he's making, like in revenue, but I don't know how much it's costing him to produce this. And that's what the ATC curve does. Okay. How do I do profit max? Tell me where the profit maximization point on this guy is. Exactly. Intersection of MC and MR, right? This is economics. Every time two lines cross, we should get excited because we're supposed to do something with it. We know when marginal revenue equals marginal cost, that's the profit maximizing quantity. Boom. What's the profit maximizing price? Is it right here? No, because I could sell this much quantity for a whole lot more. How much was the maximum amount I could sell it for? Well, I just go up to the demand curve. That's what the demand curve tells me, the maximum amount people are willing to pay at that price. And so I'll go across to there. Okay, so there's the quantity. We choose that marginal revenue equals marginal, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But the price is not here. We go up to the demand curve and then we get the price. So far, does this look at any way different than Monopoly? Nope. This is identical to Monopoly so far. Identical to Monopoly. All right. Question. How's this firm doing? Making profits? Making a loss? You didn't see that? How do you know he's making profits? Yeah, he's making profits. How do you know? Where's your key? Right. So if he's making Q products, right, this is how much it's costing him, the ATC curve. This is how much he's selling it for. That means on every single product he sells, he's making that much profit, right? So it's this high times the quantity. So his profits are going to be that rectangle right there, right? Once again, at selling Q products, it costs him that high for costs. That's what the ATC curve tells me. He's selling it for that many dollars, each one of them. He's making this much profit per product, times it by the quantity, and that's the geometric representation of the profit is that rectangle right there. Okay, so he's doing well. So far, identical to Monopoly. Okay, what is the main difference between Monopoly and monopolistic competition? Who remembers? You can kind of even hear it in the name. Monopoly versus monopolistic competition. One firm versus many firms, exactly. Monopoly, one firm. Monopolistic competition, many firms, okay? So is this sustainable in the future for a monopoly? If this was a monopoly looking like this, is that sustainable for the future? Yeah, because he's the only guy. He's gonna sit there. For monopolistic competition, something's gonna have to change though. You understand? Something's going to have to change because they can't be making profits in the long run because more people are going to come in and start selling in their marketplace. Okay, let's look at a guy who's making losses. So all I did to go from here to here was I just moved the demand curve down. You see that? So here he's making profits. The demand curve's up. Here he's making losses. The demand curve fell. Right? Marginal cost and ATC curve are the same. I just moved the demand curve down. which, don't forget, moves the marginal revenue curve down. Because where do I get the marginal revenue curve from? It's just from the demand curve. Okay, so when the demand curve falls, the marginal revenue curve falls also. Why, perhaps, would this happen? Well, there are two main reasons. One, well, I guess there could be a number of main reasons, but anything that makes the market demand curve fall is going to make his little individual demand curve fall, right? Because remember, this demand curve is not the demand for everybody in the whole market who wants ice cream. It's just the demand for the people who want Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Okay, right? Because this is a monopolistically competitive guy, right? So it's not, this demand curve is not the demand for everybody who wants ice cream. It's just the tiny demand, smaller demand for just people who want Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Okay? So why would the demand fall for people who want Ben & Jerry's ice cream? Okay? Two main reasons. The first main reason is anything that decreases the regular demand for ice cream in general is going to knock his individual demand curve down, right? So if all of a sudden people decide that ice cream is unhealthy, or all of the ice cream lovers moved to Canada or something like that, right? It's going to decrease, it'll decrease the market demand for all of ice cream as a whole, and it will also decrease the demand for his little Ben & Jerry's demand curve, right? So that's the first reason. Anything that decreases the total market demand. The other reason might be, okay, think about this. What if there were the same number of ice cream lovers in the whole marketplace, but all of a sudden, instead of just being Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs and Dreyer's as the sellers, now there's those three plus like 100 more sellers, people who came in to sell ice cream, right? Can you guys imagine this story? So instead of just being a couple of ice cream sellers, now there's a bunch of ice cream sellers. Yeah, they sell them slightly different, but what's that going to do to the number of customers that Ben & Jerry's has if there's a bunch more ice cream places opening up? It's going to take away my customers, right? And so how would I represent that? I would represent that by a fall downward in the individual level demand. Okay? Does that make sense? The total marketplace demand for all of ice cream, untouched, doesn't move. The individual level demand curve for my one firm's ice cream is going to go down, though, because all the customers are getting dragged away by the other people. That make sense? So, imagining that happened, what happened to this firm when all my customers got dragged away? I still have the same costs and the same marginal costs of production, but am I selling as many products? No. And even when I try to profit maximize, what do you note? This is the best possible quantity I could possibly make, right? Where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This is the best possible profits that I could make. But even at that point, what do you notice that's weird here? The average total cost, the cost of each ice cream that I'm selling is actually less than what I'm selling it for. Does everybody see that? And so when price is less than average total cost, even at the profit maximizing point, he's making a loss, right? So this is interesting. Just because you set marginal revenue equals marginal cost does not mean that the firm is actually making a profit, right? It could still be going out of business, but the fact of the matter is they're doing the best they can while they go out of business. Does that make sense? So setting marginal revenue equals marginal cost still is like the profit max point, we'll still call it the profit maximum point. It's still the best possible thing they can do, but they're losing money as they go out of business, but they're still losing the least amount of money they can, if that makes sense. They're doing the best they can. Okay? And once again, why did the firm all of a sudden start making losses? It's because his individual level demand curve fell. That's maybe because, you know, somebody else opened up some more ice cream shops and took away all my customers. Okay. So, in the short run, when other firms can't enter yet, right? Short run means, back up a little bit, I guess. What's the dividing line between the short run and the long run? dividing line between short run and long run, is when you have the ability to change all your fixed costs into variable costs. That's the long run. So in the long run, we can have people entering and opening up new shops. But in the short run, it's just like Monopoly. It's actually identical to Monopoly in the short run. You know, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. You go up to the demand curve, that's the price. Pretty simple. Right? If you have the ATC, you can tell me how much profits they're making. Okay, however, the long run is where the difference is, right? In the long run, nothing happens in Monopoly because there's still only one guy. In the long run here, under monopolistic competition, other people come in, they suck away my customers, and then I'm earning zero costs again. Okay? I'm earning zero profits again. Sorry. So if there's profits, like we saw a couple slides ago, if the firm was making profits, we got new firms enter the market. They suck up some of my customers, which takes my demand away, which lowers the demand curve like we saw, and the prices and the profits fall. If, on the other hand, too many firms enter and they suck away too many customers, and all of a sudden I'm making losses, well, some of the firms say, oh, never mind. I didn't actually want to sell ice cream in this market. Then they leave. Then the customers come back. It pushes the demand curve up until we get to zero profits. Right? So it's always going to move to the point where it's going to be zero profits. Okay, so here's what happens in the long run. It gets to this point. Let me draw how we get to this point real quick. Okay, so here is an individual level demand curve, individual level marginal revenue curve, marginal cost curve. I guess I should label this marginal revenue. Marginal cost curve. And then let's say I want to make this guy have profits. All right? If I want to make this guy have profits, that means the ATC curve has to be under the demand curve so that he can sell it for more than his costs. And so I'll go ahead and do this right here. It meets the MC curve at its minimum point and goes back up. ATC. Okay, so that's the minimum point right there. Now, what do we know about this firm? Well, I set marginal revenue equal marginal cost here. I make that much quantity. I sell it for that much price. And guess what? That's how much it's costing me. It's the ATC curve. That's how much I'm selling it for. All of this is profit per unit. And then I sell that many products, right? Well, there is profits going on in the marketplace. So what I know in the long run, people come in, take away some of my customers. How do I represent that here? I represent that as a decrease in demand. So demand curve will shift until about here. Okay, at which point, oops, my marginal revenue curve is supposed to be red. Let me redraw this one. My demand curve is going to come here. We'll call that D prime. Then we have a new marginal revenue curve. Which is also shifted inward, which then, when I do my profit max point and I cross here, you look and you'll see that it crosses at this point, where both the demand curve and the ATC are equal. So when I have price equal to ATC at this point right here, that means that I'm selling it for exactly how much it costs me to make the product. I have zero profits. So the whole idea here is that demand falls if I was making profits in the first place. If I was making a loss, the demand would go up because people would leave the marketplace, okay? So this is messy. This is much more beautiful, right? You can see that this is in the long run equilibrium because what do you know about this point? The demand curve is just barely touching the ATC curve, right? That means that the price they're selling the products for is exactly equal to how much it's costing them to make the products, i.e. 0 profits, right? If the price is exactly equal to how much it costs you to make the product, 0 profits, okay? And so they're still at the profit maximizing point, right? They're still at the best they could possibly do, but the best they could possibly do is now 0 profit, okay? So that's the quantity, and that's the price and average total cost. Now, if you think back to perfect competition, matter of fact, I'll even draw it for you. Let's draw a perfect competition firm. Remember, they have a flat demand curve, right? And their price is equal to their marginal revenue. And they'll have some marginal cost curve, okay? And for a perfectly competitive firm, where do they produce at? Where price is equal to marginal cost, because that's the same thing as saying marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, right? So we know that the firm's going to produce here, right? In the long run, everybody's going to make 0 profits. So I know that my ATC curve is going to be at its minimum here. And what do you notice? We're producing at an interesting point. Price is equal to marginal cost, meaning how much people are willing to pay for it is exactly how much it's costing society to make it, which is a good thing, right? We're not making extras, we're not making too little. And furthermore, the price is equal to the minimum point on the ATC curve. As in, they're making the place where it's absolutely cheapest to make it, which is the best possible place for society. I don't want to be paying extra for a product if I don't have to, right? I want the firms to naturally be at the bottom of the ATC curve, as cheap as possible, okay? This is good for society. And then this, price equals marginal cost, is good for consumer and producer surplus. That is to say, it's good for efficiency, right? Everywhere that somebody wants the product and they want it more than how much it costs, it's being produced all the way up until the point where price is equal to marginal cost, right? But let's look over here in the long run, okay? We don't have any of that wonderful stuff going on over here. Is price equal to the minimum point on the ATC in the long run? No, that's not the minimum point. Where's the minimum point? Right here where marginal cost is, right? So in the long run, we're still not making the product at the cheapest place possible, which is a bummer for society. That means as society, we're paying more than we need to for this Ben & Jerry's ice cream, right? We're not at the bottom of the ATC, 1. And 2, potentially even worse, there are people, like for example, this guy right here, okay? He's not getting the product, right? Because we're only producing up to Q products. This guy right here, look, here's how much he wants the product. That's his willingness to pay, right? Here's how much it would cost him to give him that product. The marginal cost is less than what he's willing to pay, right? So if we really want to do what's best for society, we ought to give this guy an ice cream, right? He's willing to pay more than the total costs for that ice cream, right? But he's not getting one. Only people up to Q are getting one, okay? So already you're seeing that in the long run, we start to have some problems with monopolistic competition, okay? So how do we get to this point? Well, we get to the point where price equals average total cost, and that means profits equals 0, okay? Whoops, I erased that. But the demand curve was up here, and the demand curve slid down until it just barely touched the ATC, okay? So please remember for tests, if you look at something and they're making 0 profits, and if it's a perfect competition or monopolistically competition only, right? Perfect competition or monopolistically competitive. If they're making 0 products, then they're in the long run equilibrium, right? If they're making profits, it's got to be in the short run. If they're making zero profits, it's got to be in the long run. So you can look at this and you can be like, this is definitely long run. Definitely. Because the demand curve has fallen to the point where the demand is equal to the cost and they're making zero profits. Okay? But even at this point, remember there's those two problems I was telling you about? The first problem is they're charging more than marginal cost. We call that markup. Markup. Over here, the firms are charging you only what it costs them to make it. Right? You go to the, if this is a perfectly competitive firm, like let's say the ShamWows, right? You're going to buy the ShamWow, and you know you're paying them exactly what it costs them to make it in the long run, right? Which is good for society. You're not paying them any extra, okay? But here, the marginal cost is way down here. The price you paid is way up here. You're paying them extra, right? That's called markup price. It's called markup. Markup over marginal cost, okay? So they're not producing at the minimum point on ATC. They're charging you more. Okay, that's problem number one, right? And that the price was too much. And you remember what the other problem is? This dude over here wants an ice cream, but he's not getting one. Okay, that's the second problem. And we will call that excess capacity, which means that we want the total amount of capacity to be here at the bottom of the ATC. We want them to produce this many, right? But they're not producing that many. In other words, there's excess capacity they could be producing, but they're not, okay? So we have this excess capacity problem. It's because they produce less than the cost minimizing output. So here, they're producing Q where it's at the cost min on the ATC, okay? So I just said, under perfect competition, firms produce the point that minimizes ATC. And the other problem is this, the thing that I showed you graphically. That's the markup over marginal cost. Right? Costing. We're paying them more than it costs them to make it, which is unfortunate because that gosh darn firm is still not making profits, right? It would still be maybe okay if I was paying them more than the cost and at least they were making profits. At least somebody's going to benefit in society. But if I'm paying them more than the cost and still they're making zero profits, no one's benefiting in society. We're just wasting our money as society. Okay? So that's the reason why is because price is higher than marginal cost. Under perfect competition, of course, they always sell where price equals marginal cost. Okay. What does that mean for welfare? Well, again, welfare. How are people doing in my society? We see that monopolistically competitive markets do not have the good benefits that perfectly competitive marketplaces have, right? And the whole thing comes because they're not selling the exact same product. They're selling a slightly different product, okay? Because the price is higher than the marginal cost, right? They're selling you more than it costs them to make it. The market quantity is below the socially efficient quantity, which is where we would want them to produce at. But there's no solution to this problem because the firms are charging you more than what it costs them to make it, but they're still not making profits, remember? So you can't make the firms sell it for a lower price or else you'd make them go out of business. Right? The firms are selling for as cheaply as possible. They're making zero profits, but they're still selling it for more than the marginal cost because that's the minimum they could sell it. Okay. And then there's this other issue. It's a smaller issue, but I'm going to throw this up there to you. You might not have the right number of firms in the market because new firms entering might cause some external effects. Let me tell you what that means. If you can imagine a perfectly competitive world, there's lots of firms, when you have lots of firms, you have lots of new products coming into the marketplace, and you have this thing called the product variety externality. Right? Remember what externalities are? Stuff that happens, makes other people, affects them. Well, when a whole bunch of new firms come into the marketplace, they create new products. Now me, a third party, not in the marketplace originally, looks at it and is like, oh, look at how many more new products there are. I'm happy inside, right? So we kind of want to encourage that, okay? But not as many firms enter as they could. However, there's this negative too. It's called the business stealing externality. Some firms lose when new firms enter the market. So it's uncertain whether there should be more firms entering or fewer firms entering in the monopolistically competitive world. Okay. So basically, the issue here is with monopolistically competitive marketplaces, right? We have those problems. They're selling it for more than marginal cost. We call that markup. They're selling too few of them. There are people who want this ice cream but can't get it. We call that excess capacity. But it's hard to measure, and it's even harder to fix. Actually, it might be impossible to fix, so you can't really touch it. All right, we're going to look at advertising now. We can do this together in class, together, kind of thinking about this question. So we've studied 3 market structures: perfect competition, monopoly, and monopolistic competition so far, right? In each of these, would you expect to see firms spending money to advertise their products? Why or why not? I kind of gave you the hint to this earlier. And then, is advertising good or bad from society? So let's just kind of have a little discussion. What do you guys think? First, do you expect to see advertising in perfect competition or monopoly or monopolistic competition or all of them or none of them? What do you think? Just monopolistic competition. I agree. Why is that? Exactly. They're the only ones that need to show what they have. Because they're the only ones with actually different products, right? Perfect competition, everybody's got the same product. There's no need for advertising because it's the exact same product. Furthermore, if you had extra expenditure on advertising, you'd have to raise your price a little bit to pay for it, and we all know they can't do that. Okay, so that's out. Monopoly, it's the only person out there. There's no need to advertise. That's out. Monopolistic competition, right? So we have, for the first time, we have the need for advertising because we have slightly different products. Okay. So we would expect monopolistic competition. Is this good or bad from society's point? This is actually, there's a lot of research done on advertising. In my personal opinion, it doesn't really excite me that much, but there's a lot of research done on advertising, whether it's good or bad. What do you guys think? Good or bad? I mean, in my personal opinion, I don't know. I can think of arguments for both sides. Yeah, so think about just from society. Like, is it good for society or is it bad for society? Could be informative. Right. It could be too much. So I think what you're trying to say, and I completely agree with it, it could be informative. If I see 2 brands of jeans, and I'm no jean expert, I don't know which one's the best, right? But I see that Levi's is advertising on TV all the time, I must be like, ooh, Levi's must be a legit brand, right? It's probably good. They're spending all this money on advertising. They must, because their products are really good, right? But it could be too much. It could be like, I don't really need a pair of jeans at all, but all these silly advertisements like kind of push me to buy a pair of jeans I don't really need, right? So it can be good and bad in that way. What else? What do you think? It could help you find the cheapest version of that product, right? If we have a bunch of advertised people, exactly. It can actually foster competition, promote competition, right? If everybody who sells ice cream publishes their prices, then you can be like, I'm going to go with that cheaper one, right? And then it forces everybody else to lower prices. Okay, that's good. What about from the fact that, like, advertising is a cost, and who ends up actually paying for all of the costs? the buyers, right? Because they have to pay the sellers, and the sellers end up paying the cost. So we're actually paying for advertising, but does advertising actually make, it's almost like a wasted cost, right? Like, does advertising actually make the product better? No, right? We'll get into next chapter a little bit. I'll show you a couple of examples where like advertising is just completely wasted money. Kind of a problem. Okay, so advertising. Because we have product differentiation and the fact that I'm charging people more than the marginal cost, I have to explain to somehow people why they should pay me more than the cost, right? And so why do I do that? Or what do I use to do that? I use advertising. Okay. And so in general, the more different the products are, the more advertising that firms pay for. Okay? So if you have products that are almost identical, probably it's so close to perfect competition, you won't see much advertising. Okay? But then, of course, economists, just like we had talked about, we're not really sure about if it's good for society, if it's bad for society. Some people, like me, I can totally see both sides. Okay, let's point out the bads of advertising, right? First of all, society is wasting the resources it devotes to advertising. It doesn't actually, advertising doesn't make more products. It doesn't make products better. It's not like research on how to make new products. It's just wasted dollars, some people think. Okay. The other problem, we slightly mentioned this when I gave the Levi's example. You can try to change people's preferences or change their tastes, right? Convince them to buy a pair of jeans they don't really need. That's wasteful, right? We don't want to waste money. We don't want society to be purchasing something where the cost to them is higher than their actual benefit, their willingness to pay, okay? And then on the other hand, advertising might actually make competition less, impede competition. Why? You might have two identical product, pretty much identical products, and the firms mount these huge advertising campaigns, and then all these people get like all thinking that their products are completely different, right? I don't know. Maybe let's say that Coke and Pepsi really are almost identical, but there's these two huge advertising campaigns try to convince you that Coke is better than Pepsi and that Pepsi is better than Coke or something like that, and really they're just pretty much the same thing, right? And so the more differentiated the products are, the more that they can charge, raise the price for it, right? And then they're just taking money away from the customer. Okay. Now, what are some of the good pieces to advertising? Well, we mentioned this a couple times. It does give us useful information at times. It does give us useful information. Not only where to buy the product, but how much the product costs. If it's a high quality product, perhaps, okay? And of course, when we know the cheapest product, we normally go and buy the cheapest one. It forces everybody else to lower their prices, right? I've easily noticed this with Amazon Prime shipping, for example. Amazon Prime shipping advertised 2-day shipping, right? And everybody ran to go buy from Amazon. What did all the other companies do that now ship? They all have to do 2-day shipping too, right? So that made my world better because I just bought some running shoes from a different company. And guess what? They came in 2 days just because this company knew I could have bought them from Amazon with 2-day shipping, so they had to offer a comparative service, right? So that's better. Because we're informed, because I'm an informed buyer, the company knows that, they have to become a better seller, right? And so if that's true, it promotes competition, right? It forced the other companies to all have 2-day shipping. And so it reduces the ability of the companies to charge more for their services, which is called market power. Right? Okay. So this is interesting. And actually, I think that you brought this up about it can tell you where the cheapest price is. They actually did a study. They compared two states. One of them, I think it was Florida, it's illegal to advertise the price of your glasses, eyeglasses, like, you know, prescription glasses, and the other state it's not illegal. I don't know why it's illegal to advertise the price. Probably because, I don't know, a bunch of eyeglass manufacturers got together and lobbied the government to try to keep consumers in the dark, right? But basically, we had two states. One of them where the consumers got to look at the advertisements and they got to see the prices of the glasses. The other one where they were in the dark, they didn't know the prices of all the other companies. Where do you think the glasses were more expensive? In the no advertising part, right? So we see an example of advertising actually driving down the prices. That's what this study showed, right? Kind of interesting, and it sort of makes sense, right? If people know where the cheapest eyeglasses are, then they're going to go drive and buy them. So the fact that these companies are spending money to advertise the price of their glasses actually is better off for us buyers. Okay, so advertising can signal your quality. I kind of gave this example about the Levi's jeans, right? So if a firm is willing to spend huge amounts on advertising, maybe we might start thinking that the quality of its product is high, right? Even if the advertisement was nothing, right? Even if it's a terrible advertisement. Let's suppose that I see a company Levi's, let's say, because I've been using that as an example, advertise their jeans in the Super Bowl, right? Everybody knows that advertisements in the Super Bowl are like $1 million per 30 seconds. I kid you not, like that's how much they cost, right? That's not even to make the advertisement. That's just the amount of money that you have to pay to the network for the permission to play your spot, they call it, your advertisement, okay? And let's say it was just a picture of jeans, and it was just the worst produced advertisement. Well, I might look at that and I may be like, well, Levi's, obviously they must have had a good enough product in order just to spend all that money just of a picture of their jeans for 30 seconds, right? So that might make me want to buy their product because I think it's a high quality product, because they're willing to spend a lot of money on it, even if the actual advertisement itself was terrible. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and one of the things that we think about here is like, well, I might buy the product one time because the advertisement convinced me, but the firm's not really going to get a lot of profit off of me unless I keep coming back and buying the product over and over again, right? So let's say that I'm watching these Budweiser ads or these Coca-Cola ads in the Super Bowl, right? I'm like, wow, they spent so much money on this silly advertisement. That must mean that people keep coming back and buying Budweiser over and over and over again. Oh, Budweiser must be good then if all these people think it's good. Okay, side note, it's not, but no, I'm just kidding, right? That's totally up to your taste, right? But this is how the advertising process works, right? Coca-Cola the same way. We just get thinking that, oh, people must be buying Coke all the time because it's like really delicious, and so I'm going to want to buy it too, right? So that's the idea. That ads are not worthwhile unless they lead to repeat buyers. People don't become repeat buyers unless it's a good product to begin with. So if they're running expensive ads, then I might as well purchase the product because I know it's probably a good product. All right, so that's kind of like a little bit of psychology there, right? Kind of getting in the mind of the consumer. Okay, so the conclusion is when customers see expensive ads, they think the product must be good since the company is willing to spend so much on advertising in the first place. Yeah, that makes sense? Okay. Brand names. This is highly linked to advertising, right? Because generally, who advertises? Does the generics advertise? No. You see the people who advertise are the people with the brand names, right? So, you see Kraft macaroni and cheese being advertised. You don't see Albertsons store brand being advertised, right? So, brand names. They coexist with the generics, just like I said, right? Kraft brand macaroni and cheese versus Albertsons brand macaroni and cheese or something like that. And firms with brand names are the ones that spend money on advertising, right? General Mills advertises Cheerios, but Albertsons does not advertise their oat circles or whatever they call those products, right? And they charge higher prices for their products. Part of it goes to advertising, part of it goes to their own product, but they have to convince you to pay more for Cheerios than for the oat circles or whatever the generic brand is. And so they do that with advertising, right? And so, I mean, it's uncertain about if brand names really are helpful or harmful to the economy. It basically goes along the same lines as advertising. Look, bad things about brand names. It makes you think that there are differences that don't really exist. So maybe Cheerios and oat circles really are the exact same thing. Yet people go waste more money on Cheerios because they think they're better. Or maybe a Gucci purse is really the exact same as a leather Costco purse, right? But people spend 10 times more for the Gucci purse because they think it's different, right? Okay. Sometimes people think it's irrational or silly to pay more for brand names, right? But people do it all the time, right? People buy Duracell batteries instead of, store brand batteries. And so if you got rid of brand names, how would you do that? Well, currently, how is a brand name kept a brand name? There's this thing, the U.S. Trademark Office. Like if you come up with your name, Cheerios, like no one else could use Cheerios. So that's why they have to use oat circles, right? But if you got rid of that protection, you let everybody call their food Cheerios, well then suddenly everything looks the same. Okay? And then there would be more competition and more lower prices. So a lot of people think that would be better for society. Okay? But on the defense, what is a good part of brand names? They provide information about quality, perhaps. Perhaps Cheerios really are better than oat circles, or perhaps Gucci purses really are better than Costco leather purses, right? So if I have a brand name, I know that I can purchase the better product. Okay? Or maybe Duracell batteries or Energizer batteries really do last longer than store brand batteries, right? If I have a brand name attached, I don't have to spend all that work testing and making sure I'm getting a good battery. I just go with the brand name right away. You know? When I go travel with my family, let me tell you what, I don't stay in Joe's motel on the side of the road, right? When I arrive someplace and I have my kids and we get someplace and we're tired and I need a safe place to sleep, guess what? I look for Marriott. That's just my personal opinion. Why do I do that? Because I know that I'm not going to have a problem in a Marriott. You know what I mean? Right? So that's an example of a brand name helping people. Okay? It provides information. And why does that work? Well, Marriott knows that if they have a couple of crappy hotels, it's going to make their whole name look bad. So they don't have any of them. Right? We know that the brand names, they protect their reputation. Right? So that can be kind of a way that brand names are good. All right, so in general, we have differentiated products everywhere. In my personal opinion, this is the largest type of market structure, the most often that firms are located in this kind of market structure with differentiated products. Okay? And so, even though it describes many of the markets in the economy, what should we do as a policymaker in the government? It's uncertain. Because we do have some problems in monopolistic competition, but there's really no answers for it. We can figure out the profit maximizing price and quantity pretty easily, but other than that, we don't really know how we can help society be better, get to a better outcome. All right? Question?